Hi, I'm Terri Kimble here, and with our public policy series, it is really exciting to have Senator Sean Bowie joining us here today. So thank you, Senator Bowie, for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we are obviously in a state of flux right now. Can you talk about first of all, everything that you've been working on, even though you haven't been down at the Capitol recently?
Sure. So just to give a little background, we recessed our legislative session about a month ago. Feels like it's been several months and not just a month. We passed a bipartisan budget, which is a pretty rare thing. If you go back and look at recent years, we passed the bipartisan budget and also approved some funding for COVID-19 related relief measures. Altogether, a little over $100 million that is up to the governor's discretion. He's allowed to use those funds for relief measures relating to this crisis. So for things like food banks, for rental assistance, eviction assistance, homeless shelters, things like that. So the governor has started allocating that money already, and we certainly hope that more of it goes out here in the next couple of weeks. I've been working from home the last couple of weeks. We have not been at the Capitol. And in that time, I've spent a lot of time answering emails and phone calls from constituents about ways to help. And we're getting a lot of questions, more so about federal actions. So we're working to put them in touch with Senator Sinema's office, Senator McSally's office, Congresswoman Stanton's office, answering questions about the PPP loans that have started going out. So I've actually been reaching out to banks here in the area, trying to grease the wheels of that. We've been getting questions about, unemployment benefits and about Medicaid and a lot of state resources. So I'm constantly replying to emails and bringing staff in to help as well. So we're able to do a lot of that at home, thankfully, having those resources. So we're going to continue to do that here in the next couple of weeks until we go back into our legislative session. And when we do go back into session, I imagine it's going to be probably 100% focused on additional relief measures and ways that we can help on the health side and also on the economic side as well.
When do you anticipate going back to session?
It's a popular question. I get that a lot. We initially were supposed to come back April 13th, and that date has come and gone. At this point, given everything I'm hearing, I'd say probably mid-May at the earliest. And then because we passed our state budget, that's our big requirement for the year. So now that that's done, we don't technically have to come back, but I think there's going to be a lot of folks who want to come back and pass additional relief measures. And depending on how the revenue numbers look, we might have to go back and revise the state budget that we just passed, possibly use the rainy day fund. So we're going to be discussing that here over the next couple of weeks. And we're going to keep an eye on the data that's coming in on the revenue side and also on the health side as well. As we see the number of cases continue to rise, we're going to want to continue to keep an eye on that as well.
So that's one of the biggest challenges. We're looking to you as leaders down there to really have kind of a crystal ball because, for instance, sales tax revenues, what you anticipate, and then because of the lag when they come in, how do you do a budget around that?
Yeah, it's difficult. And, folks remember the Great Recession. And back in 2009, 2010, at the time we had about a $10 billion budget and about a $3 billion deficit. And unlike the federal government, who can add on debt and borrow, we have to balance our budget at the state level every year. And the way our tax system is structured, we're going to be harder hit than other states because of which taxes we're reliant on. About 45% of our state revenue is our state sales tax. About another 45% is our state income tax. So what's been happening is folks are losing their jobs. They're not paying income tax, and they're buying fewer things other than groceries, which most cities don't tax. So that's a lot of lost revenue. And when you look at our state budget, which is now about $12 billion, half of that goes to K-12. Another big chunk goes to our universities, goes to healthcare, goes to roads. A city like Chandler, infrastructure is really important. So it makes it really difficult. So we're going to be keeping an eye on these revenue numbers here in the next couple of months. Um, we hope that the federal government is going to be passing some relief for state and local governments. That's something they've been talking about. But just because we're required to balance our budget every year and because of the taxes that we're reliant on, it makes it really difficult for us to recoup some of that lost revenue and try to balance our budget. So we're going to have a lot of big decisions to make when we do go back into session here, and whether it's May or June or possibly later.
What is the biggest thing that the states had to navigate during this whole crisis from a legislative standpoint?
Well, certainly the revenue is pretty substantial, and we've been working with our federal delegation too to try to get resources from the federal level. It'll bring up the PPP loans. Um, Obviously, that was a big part of the stimulus package, about $350 billion, and really critical for our small businesses, here in Chandler and throughout the state. And we've been working with the governor and working with Senator McSally and Senator Sinema to make sure that those submissions were being accepted and that those loans were going out. We are hearing that they're now starting to go out, which is good. But that program is already out of money, and certainly I'd like to see Congress come in quickly and pass an expansion of that program. That's going to allow our small businesses to pay their employees, to keep their doors open. So I'm hopeful that our congressional delegation will make that a priority here in the next couple of weeks.
So one of the issues that we're hearing from a business side, because we are a business organization, is some of the issues and hiccups with the unemployment and DES and filing and just the whole backup, people being left on hold for 4 hours and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about what measures are being put in place, or are there?
Yeah, there definitely are. They're ramping up their staffing. Obviously in normal times, their call volume is much lower, and they just didn't have the personnel to be able to process all of those requests. So I've been getting those emails too. I've been hearing from folks who have been calling, 40, 50 times a day trying to get through. I have heard it's gotten a little bit better, that call times have been reduced. I think they're staffing up as quickly as they can. Another part of that federal stimulus bill that passed was an addition to the unemployment benefits on top of our state amount. And Arizona has one of the lowest unemployment totals in the country. I think it's about $240 a week. And I believe the federal bill added several $100s on top of that. So that should be a good cushion for folks who have lost their jobs. And like I said, I think the DES is staffing up as quickly as they can. I think our appropriation that we doled out for the governor, I think, could be used potentially to hire more folks to be able to process those claims. So that's another thing we can look at when we go back into session, is the need to ramp up staffing. Because usually in a downturn, we've seen in recent downturns, there's an incentive to freeze hiring and only hire, essential employees. And this is an area of government which really does need resources right now. And, I'd likely be supportive of efforts to ramp up the hiring on that, because there are a lot of folks who need jobs right now, and there's definitely a need for those benefits to be processed. So I think that's something we might take a look at when we go back into session here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
So with that being said, there's been a lot of juggling and from different departments and better coordination. How are you keeping connected? Because you have to make sure that you have to comply with the open meetings law and you guys can't go back into session. How are you communicating, or how are things communicated with your constituent or with your colleagues?
So we are jumping on conference calls once a week to go over things. We're constantly in touch via email and text message as well. I actually have two committee hearings the last week of April. We have our joint legislative budget committee and our joint committee on capital review, which is required to meet every quarter. And this quarter's meeting, I think, is going to be April 29th. And we're going to be doing that over Zoom, which is going to be an adjustment. We haven't done that before, but there are projects that we need to approve, including at the universities. We have to approve those projects before they can start construction and start building. So that's an example of how we're still doing our jobs, using technology to do that. As far as communicating with my constituents, I'm posting a lot on social media. I have a weekly newsletter for my campaign that I send out, and I've been typing that up every Monday and with videos and posting each Monday morning. So I'm trying to do as much as I can and trying to share as much information as possible while I'm working from home and not being at the Capitol. And Terri, you know me, I love the work and I love being at the Capitol. That's a big part of it, is being able to see people, and a lot of that work is behind the scenes, and obviously we can't do that right now. So I'm trying to do as much as I can while staying at home and working from home.
Well, great. So after all this, if we aren't learning from some of the mistakes that we've made or decisions that have made, what are some of your biggest takeaways on areas that we can improve as a state?
Obviously, hindsight is always 2020, both at the state level and at the federal level. But something like this has obviously never happened in our lifetimes, and you'd have to go back. I think 1918 was the last really bad pandemic. I think doing more to be prepared for something like this, in terms of funding the equipment that we need, the infrastructure on the healthcare side, is really important. Thankfully, we've been able to pass a budget this year that did not use a lot of the revenue that we were projected to have. So that means we have a little bit of a softer cushion when we try to balance the budget going forward. But it's one of the jobs of government to prepare for things like this. And when we do eventually come out of this crisis, you're going to have a lot of folks who very clearly remember what happened, and we could have been better prepared for it if we had made some of those investments and coordinated better with the federal government and a whole host of things. So I think when we do eventually come out of this, I think there's going to be a lot of sober thought about, okay, if this happens again, how can we best prepare for that and take those lessons that we've learned and those mistakes that have happened at the state level and at the federal level, and be better prepared for the next downturn, whenever it may be.
That's very good advice. Can you imagine in 1918, they didn't have Zoom?
We did not have Zoom. How did people have meetings? It's crazy.
Exactly. Well, I just want to personally thank you for your leadership. You have been a true advocate for business down there. I know that sometimes that's difficult because you do have to cross party lines, but you always keep the best interest for business in the forefront, and that is critical, and we need more like you. So thank you for everything that you do and all of your support for the business community.
And my pleasure, and thank you as well for all the information you've been putting out. And I know you've been working really closely with Senator Sinema and Senator McSally in the governor's office. So really appreciate the job that you all are doing in Chandler as well.
It takes many of us to do this. It's not just one entity, and that's the key thing, is we really need to band together and work closer together. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to having you back after this to get the next update.
Got it. Stay safe, everybody.
All right. Thank you.